Yes.
2 points. Is there any good practice one can view with respect to the balkanization of nations? What I mean to say, in particular, we've got our issues in Europe with regards to Belgium almost splitting up in half, and we've got Scotland here wanting independence. But then Iraq, it strikes me, will be a violent sort of balkanization. Is there any good practice to ensure that we have less violent ways of having balkanization, one? And two...
I wish life was so easy. The gentleman wanted to know if there was any way of seeing that if there were minimizing the violence and the balkanization of these parts of the world. I don't know that there is. You know, it hasn't. Obviously, I'm fairly familiar with the situation in Cambodia, for instance, because I was a correspondent there in 1974 through 77. In that part of the world, I was in Cambodia actually for the last days of the war. I went out on the American helicopters in April of '75, and when the Khmer Rouge came in. That was a time of enormous violence. And a lot of these breakups have been accompanied, unfortunately, by great violence. But once you get past that, at least you get to a point where you have a relatively decent chance of establishing countries that can work for these people. Unfortunately, it often does take violence in order to accomplish that. I don't see any necessary way around that, unfortunately. But again, remember, fighting your way back up that path that you took the wrong path up can sometimes be very bloody, unfortunately.
Would you like to take another final question then?
Sure. There's one I haven't heard from.
I guess the question you talked about, well, balkanization and the emergence of microstates, but do you see any role, any positive role of global agencies? So the further development of the UN or these larger organizations, WTO, etc. What is their role now?
Well, I have to tell you, I'm not a huge fan of the United Nations. And I know Louise is a huge fan, and I apologize for that. But the UN has many useful purposes, all right? One of the useful purposes, of course, is it's a way for countries to get together and to blow off steam and to vent and to really talk about their issues and problems in a world arena, global arena. There are units of the United Nations that are enormously useful and successful. I mean, UNICEF, UNESCO, and so on. I mean, some of these are doing the UN Relief and Works Agency, the refugee agencies. Some of these are enormous value, and there should be a United Nations. I'm convinced of that. There should be multinational organizations for that very purpose. Other multinational organizations outside of the UN, actual UN structure, do enormous good works. The OECD, for instance. I just talked with the Secretary General of the OECD last week, and we had a nice conversation. And they really do have a very good sense of how the rich countries can help the poor countries. And I think groupings like that can be an enormous benefit for the future of the world in terms of helping all of these new states to really reach some kind of a critical mass of development and so on, so that they don't become, they get out of the concept, they get out of the bonds of poverty and so on. And that's great, and they should have that organization. There are other aspects of the UN I'm not such a huge fan of, but for the most part, I think that they do serve a useful purpose. Okay.